President Trump delivered a big speech on the Venezuelan crisis last night, and far from retreating from his position of supporting regime change, he seemed to double down, saying that soon the Venezuelan people will be free, in his words. President Trump last night sounded like he was even firmer in his opposition to Maduro's continued reign than ever before. The speech was made allegedly before a crowd of Venezuelan Americans at FIU in Miami. Of course, I am curious how much of that crowd was actually Cuban and not Venezuelan. It's interesting how strong the Miami lobby has pushed for regime change in Venezuela, seeing as how they failed to achieve it in Cuba so many times. From what the president said last night, it seems to me that it's almost a foregone conclusion that Maduro will be gone. The U.S. Has never taken such a strong stand on deposing a leader as they have with Maduro, and they're not gone through with it. Except for, of course, if you count the Bay of Pigs. But I really think that that was a one-off event. The fact that Senator Marco Rubio of Florida has flown to Colombia would seem to support my suspicions that they're going to be moving and taking action against Maduro soon. Rubio is allegedly in Colombia to help coordinate the transportation of humanitarian aid into Venezuela, which was requested by Juan Guaido, who of course is the man that the U.S. recognizes as the legitimate president. Now, the U.S. is famous for stuffing in weapons into its quote-unquote humanitarian aid packages, and considering that this is going through Colombia, I wouldn't be shocked to see that the Colombian military is helping to smuggle weapons to some folks in Venezuela to use in a potential civil war that may break out. Rubio, of course, a fluent Spanish speaker, I'm sure is able to coordinate with all the involved parties down there, and is a very a good student of conventional American foreign policy, so I'm sure he's all in with the plan to get to oust Maduro by any means necessary. That, of course, combined with the now old news of the appointment of Elliot Death Squads Abrams, who is quite famous for his exploits in Latin America during the Reagan administration. I don't see any way now how the U.S. Will back out of overthrowing the government of Venezuela as it currently exists. Now, what I will find quite interesting is whether or not they're able to achieve this without U.S. boots on the ground. Now, I'm sure the president wants to avoid that, and that his advisors have been telling him that really we can achieve what we want by just arming the rebels, or, well, potential rebels. There aren't any really rebels yet, other than Guaido himself, it would seem. The military hasn't rebelled. We heard a couple reports about a couple of generals defecting to Guaido's side, but then there hasn't been any news on that since. I mean, you would think if they were generals and defected and brought their troops with them, that would have led to an instant civil war, just like what happened in Spain in the 1930s. Frankly, I don't see a potential insurgency in Venezuela being able to have the oomph to overthrow Maduro. Frankly, I think if they try that strategy, it will look a lot like the Bay of Pigs, in which Kennedy did not want American troops in Cuba, and so he he merely helped arm, or rather the CIA helped arm some Cuban expats who invaded Cuba only to get slaughtered by Castro in fairly short order. If the neocons don't have necessarily a firm enough grasp or a hold on Trump, well, then we very well may see the same thing happen to the recipients of these American arms in Venezuela. And we do know for a fact that the U.S. has been sending arms to Venezuela because the government intercepted them, and I can assure you that considering they were Colt rifles with Magpul magazines and quite a few other accessories, based on the sanctions, I don't think that Venezuela could have just gone out and purchased these on the open market and then staged a little false flag and said, oh, the U.S. sent these here. Now, I'm pretty sure the U.S. would have had to send them. Of course, that was a fairly small shipment. Wouldn't have been enough, certainly, to arm an insurgency. But who knows how many have made it through that haven't been caught by the government. And certainly how many weapons are going from Colombia through the jungle into Venezuela, right, as we speak. But ultimately, I think this will come down to Trump's willingness to follow through on his threats. Trump has not been the most pro-war president in American history, thankfully. He hasn't certainly been a peacenik, but he's been more, I would say he generally favors peace, and does not like to see American soldiers die for stupid reasons. Now, the question then is, by the time that it becomes clear that American troops on the ground are the only way to depose Maduro, will Trump have convinced himself by then that, Maduro is Hitler and must go at all costs? That, I'm not sure. We'll have to. That's the one variable that I'm still waiting on, because it seems very clear to me the U.S. is going to go all in. But is Trump willing to take egg on his face if the plan ends up failing, or is he going to double down and just go all in? Oh, and additionally, the CITGO, the U.S. arm of the Venezuelan state oil company, has just purged all Maduro loyalists from executive positions. So it seems like the Guaido camp has a pretty firm hold on the Venezuelan oil money. I'm not sure if Venezuela will continue to export oil to the U.S. or if the CITGO oil is they're just going to sell what they have in inventory and hope that Guaido takes over the country so that they can get back to business. That will be something to watch. If you've made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing. I intend to keep up the daily videos, so I'll see you tomorrow.